The sound of screeching tires shattered the peaceful mountain morning. I looked out from my cabin window, and there she was again. HOA President Martha, in her crisp suit and permanent scowl, barking orders at her guests to hop the fence. Why? Because I refused to open my private gate for her luxury party. But what she didn't know, this land wasn't just mine. The gate, it protected a painful legacy, one I'd guard with my life. After everything I'd been through, all I wanted was peace. That's why I bought the cabin. 2 years ago, I buried my wife, the only person who ever truly knew me, after she was killed by a drunk driver who never even stopped to check if she was alive. Grief swallowed me whole. The city was too loud, too fast, too full of memories that punched me in the chest at every corner. So, I cashed in what little savings we had left, packed up her favorite books, a worn-out rocking chair she loved, and a framed photo of us from the day we bought our first home, and I vanished into the woods. My cabin sat at the edge of a serene mountain lake, tucked between towering pines and snow-capped ridges, with a single gravel path that led to a wooden gate I built myself. That gate wasn't just a fence. It was a boundary between the shattered life I left behind and the peace I was desperately trying to build. My property came with a clause: private trail access, land ownership extending beyond the cabin, and total isolation from the nearby HOA-managed resort community. That was the deal, and I thought I was finally free. The first 6 months were a kind of silent healing. I spent my mornings sipping coffee by the lake, evenings watching the stars, the kind of sky you forget exists when you've lived too long beneath city lights. I restored the dock with my own hands. I planted wildflowers around the trail leading down the ridge. Most importantly, I built a small memorial garden for Emily, my wife, just behind the cabin. A wooden bench with her name engraved in it, wind chimes that she would have adored, and a small plaque that read, "Forever my anchor in the storm." No one disturbed me, not even the animals. But that changed the day Martha came knocking. She arrived wearing an HOA badge like it was a sheriff's star, crisp pantsuit, clipboard in hand, lips curled into a smile that felt more like a threat than a greeting. She said she was the new president of HOA and was doing courtesy visits to all community-adjacent properties. I reminded her, politely but firmly, that I wasn't part of the HOA. My land was deeded separately, no covenants, no shared roads, no obligations. She nodded, eye scanning my gate, my cabin, my garden. "Beautiful spot," she said. "You ever host events?" I shook my head. She laughed. "You should. It'd be such a hit with our guests. I might send a few your way next month, during our lake retreat. Just a little spillover traffic. No big deal." I told her no, clearly and calmly. "I didn't move up here to entertain strangers," I said. Her smile flickered for a second, and then she was gone. I thought that was the end of it. But the following weekend, I noticed something odd. My trail camera, one of 3 I'd placed discreetly around the property, showed 2 women walking straight through my gate, lounging on my dock like they owned the place. I confronted them gently. They seemed confused, even annoyed. Martha said it was open for resort use. One of them muttered. I locked the gate that evening, upgraded it with a stronger deadbolt, posted a sign that read, "Private property. No access beyond this point." Still, more people came. 3 teens on bikes, a couple with wine glasses, and a Bluetooth speaker. Then, on the 3rd Saturday, I came home from a supply run to find a full-blown party happening on my land. 20 people, folding chairs, loud music, kids swimming in my lake, and Martha, standing smugly at the edge of my memorial garden, sipping white wine like this was her backyard. My blood boiled. I asked her what the hell she was doing. She smiled and said, "You weren't using it, and the view's too good to waste. Besides, it's not like it's hurting anyone." I told her to leave. She laughed. "You really want to be that guy? The angry old man yelling at kids for having fun?" She waved her hand like I was a mosquito. The guests looked at me like I was the intruder. My voice shook as I told them to get off my land. Not because I was afraid, but because my hands were trembling from the rage. That night, I called the local sheriff's office. They said it was a civil issue. Apparently, if someone breaks into your property but claims an HOA gave them permission, You don't have the right to physically remove them unless there's a safety threat. I asked if I could press charges. The deputy sighed and told me, "Best you can do is put up more signs and keep a record." So I did. I installed cameras. I doubled the locks. I posted clearer signage. But none of it stopped them. It wasn't just about access anymore. It was about power. Martha wanted control, and she couldn't stand the idea that my cabin, my land, existed outside her reach. She saw my solitude as defiance, my gate as rebellion, and in her HOA world, no one was allowed to say no. I'd built that cabin as a refuge, but now it felt like a fortress under siege. Every time I walked through my own trail, I was checking over my shoulder. Every time I watered Emily's flowers, I half expected someone to trample through them. It wasn't just a gate she was after. It was ownership over me, over my grief, over the one place I had left that still felt sacred. That night, I stood on my porch in the darkness, listening to the wind rustle through the pines. I made a silent vow, speaking to the stars, to Emily, to whoever was listening. I will not open that gate. Not for her. Not for anyone. And if she tries to force her way through again, she'll learn that peace can turn into war when you try to steal it from a man with nothing left to lose. It was a Sunday morning when everything shifted from annoying to terrifying. The air was cool, crisp, and smelled of pine. Exactly the kind of morning that reminded me why I came here. But that peace shattered like a window hit by a brick. I was halfway through making breakfast when I heard music. Not the soft chirping of birds or the rustling of leaves. It was loud, invasive, and completely out of place. Bass thumping, someone laughing too hard, the clinking of glasses. I stepped out onto my porch in my flannel shirt and boots, and what I saw made my heart sink. A group of at least 20 strangers was sprawled out across my yard like it was some damn resort lounge. My wooden patio chairs, the ones I had built by hand in honor of my wife, were being used for some woman's yoga session. Kids were running around near my dock, splashing water on a carved bench I'd built in Emily's memory. A man was setting up a drone to take overhead footage. Someone was even lighting a fire in my pit, my private fire pit, and standing right in the center of it all, arms folded, sunglasses on, and that same smug little smile that made my skin crawl, was Martha. I stormed down the steps and marched straight toward her, but not before grabbing my phone to start filming. "What the hell is going on here, Martha?" I asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. She turned to me slowly, like I was a minor inconvenience interrupting her cocktail hour. "It's just a wellness retreat," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "The HOA community needed space for a yoga and nature day, and your lot is ideal. We assumed you'd be cooperative again." "You assumed wrong," I snapped. "This is trespassing. You're on private property." Her expression didn't even change. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We didn't break anything. We're just enjoying the space. Besides," she added with a smirk, "some of the board members discussed it, and there's a strong argument that the trail your gate blocks should be shared access. It's connected to the resort's lake view." I was stunned, not just by the arrogance, but by the way her guests were looking at me. Some with amusement, others with irritation, like I was the one interrupting their day. I asked them to leave, again, politely but firmly. A couple of them chuckled. One woman even rolled her eyes and said, "Relax, old man, it's just land." That hit me harder than I expected. Just land. That land was the last piece of my life I had left. I spent every day tending to it, not because it was a hobby, but because it was how I coped with Emily being gone. Every tree I trimmed, every flower I planted, every board I nailed into that dock, it all meant something. This wasn't some party space. It was sacred. I walked to the fire pit and doused the flames myself. That got their attention. Martha stomped over, suddenly dropping the fake charm. "You can't just kick us off," she hissed. "This is a community event. I gave permission." And I didn't. I snapped. "You don't own this land. You don't have the right." She leaned in, voice low and venomous. "You're making enemies, you know. People talk. The community doesn't like hostile neighbors." That word, hostile, was the beginning of a storm I didn't yet see coming. Because a week later, I received a letter slipped under my door in a plastic sleeve. It was a formal notice from the HOA board, notice of noncompliance and community disruption. According to them, I had violated an implied community access clause, a clause that didn't even exist in my deed because, again, I wasn't part of the damn HOA. They accused me of creating a hostile environment, of threatening guests, and of blocking communal access points. They wanted to fine me $5,000 for obstructing a designated community view path. I laughed at first. Then I cried. Then I got angry. I wrote a rebuttal with attached copies of my property deed, county survey maps, and even photos proving that my land was deeded separately and never annexed by the HOA. I hand-delivered the letter to their office. 2 days later, I found that same letter unread, folded back into its original envelope, sitting in my mailbox with the word refused written across it in red ink. Things escalated quickly after that. A week later, I heard loud popping noises at night. I thought maybe it was fireworks, but when I checked my trail cams, I saw shadows, figures in hoodies, sneaking around my fence, tossing what looked like eggs at my windows. One morning, I walked outside to find my mailbox shattered. Another day, I saw tire marks on my driveway. Someone had spun donuts in the gravel, tearing up the earth I'd spent weeks leveling. It wasn't just random vandalism. It was targeted. It was personal. I knew Martha was behind it, directly or indirectly, and I knew she thought she could wear me down, that I'd eventually cave, that I'd crack under the pressure of being the outsider. But what she didn't understand, what none of them did, was that I'd already lived through hell. I'd already lost everything. And when a man loses the love of his life and crawls his way back from the pit of despair, the last thing that scares him is a handful of entitled neighbors with wine glasses and a false sense of power. So I started documenting everything, every guest, every incident. I put up new cameras. I bought stronger locks. I replaced my private property signs with large, engraved metal plates that couldn't be torn down. I sent another letter, this time, to a lawyer. I wasn't going to be bullied. Not again. Not by Martha. Not by anyone. I didn't move to the woods to find peace only to have it stolen by a woman in heels with a fake title and a God complex. The war had begun, but I had one thing she didn't, truth, and I was done being silent. I didn't know how deep the HOA's clause went until I became their target. After Martha's unauthorized party on my land and the bogus $5,000 violation, fine they tried to slap on me, I thought the worst was over. That once I made it clear I had no legal ties to their organization, they'd back off. But I underestimated just how far some people will go when their authority is challenged. Martha didn't just want access to my property. She wanted to break me, to make an example out of the one man who dared say no to her smug little empire. The next week, the mail stopped arriving on time. I'd get only half of my packages, if they came at all. Deliveries that once made it down my long gravel drive were suddenly undeliverable. Then came the rumors. A neighbor from the other side of the lake, whom I barely knew, stopped by while fishing one afternoon and told me people in the resort were saying I was unstable, that I was ex-military with PTSD, that I'd pulled a gun on Martha, which was not only false, but disgusting. I'm a grieving husband, not some lunatic. I hadn't touched a firearm since my wife died, but the whispers were spreading like wildfire. I saw it in their eyes when I'd go into the small town nearby. The way the barista's smile faltered when she saw my face. The way the hardware store clerk suddenly couldn't find the order I placed. Then came the real hit. My property insurance was suddenly under review. I got a letter from the carrier saying they had received anonymous reports of hostile behavior and unregistered gatherings. They wanted to schedule an inspection. I couldn't believe it. I had no gatherings. I didn't even have guests. The only people throwing unregistered events on my land were Martha and her party of sun hat-wearing freeloaders. I called my lawyer, furious, and he warned me. HOA groups, especially wealthy, well-connected ones, could influence more than I realized. They could make life unbearable if I didn't push back legally. But legal fees weren't cheap, and while I wasn't poor, I wasn't exactly flush with cash either. My savings were meant to last me into retirement, not for court battles over property lines that were already crystal clear. Still, I had no choice. I filed a formal cease and desist through my attorney, sending notarized documents to Martha and the HOA board. We included aerial maps, surveyor statements, and my deed, all proving my property was excluded from the HOA's jurisdiction. For a moment, I thought the paper shield would protect me. But Martha wasn't done. The next time she came, she didn't come with guests. She came with 2 uniformed men, not police, but private security contractors, wearing sunglasses and bulletproof vests. They said they were there to assess the fire safety hazard posed by my gate and fencing, claiming that my installation obstructed emergency egress for the community. I laughed in their faces. "There's no community back here," I told them. "There's just me. And you have no right to inspect anything on private land without a warrant." One of the men stepped forward, hand resting casually on his holster. "Sir, we don't want trouble," he said in a way that made it clear he would be just fine with trouble if I gave him a reason. I refused to open the gate. Martha, standing behind them in her usual blazer and pearls, shouted, "You're endangering lives with this kind of stubbornness. That path connects to our trail system." I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "The only thing this path connects to is my grief. You don't own it. You don't own me. And you sure as hell don't get to weaponize fake emergencies to bully your way in." They left, but not without warning. That night, someone left a box at my gate. Inside was a broken piece of fencing and a handwritten note. "Last chance. Cooperate, or things escalate." That note didn't scare me. It enraged me. I filed a police report, even though I knew they wouldn't act. "Civil matter," the deputy told me again, with a look that said he didn't want to get involved in HOA drama. But I wasn't letting this go. I set up floodlights, upgraded my security cameras, installed motion sensors. I even started wearing a body cam when walking the perimeter, just to have a record. My peace was gone, but my will was steel. Still, the weight of it all was exhausting. I'd sit in Emily's memorial garden at night, staring up at the stars, wondering if this is what she'd want for me. This constant fight, this isolation wrapped in barbed wire. But then I'd remember why I came here. She and I dreamed of this cabin. She picked the exact spot by the lake. She called it our forever view. Letting Martha take even a sliver of that felt like letting Emily's memory be trampled. No, I wouldn't let it happen. Then came the meeting. My lawyer and I attended the HOA board session, not because we had to, but because we wanted to show them we weren't scared. They tried to laugh me out of the room until my lawyer laid out the full extent of our evidence. The room went quiet. Martha, red-faced, insisted we were distorting facts and that my gate was a threat to community harmony. I replied, voice calm and steady, "The only threat here is your obsession with control." That line echoed. A few board members shifted in their chairs. I saw doubt in their eyes. Not everyone was on her side anymore. Maybe, just maybe, the truth was cracking through the facade. But it wasn't over. I knew Martha wouldn't go down quietly. And as I left that room, I had the sinking feeling she was planning something bigger, something reckless. This wasn't about land anymore. It was about pride, about power, and about how far someone like her would go to feel untouchable. But she forgot something crucial. When a man has already lost everything, he becomes the one person you should never try to break. Because what's left of him is the most dangerous thing of all. A quiet storm that's done being silent. By the time fall rolled in and the leaves turned from deep greens to blood reds and rusted gold, the gate I once built as a quiet boundary had become a line of war. It no longer simply marked the edge of my property. It marked the place where my peace ended and Martha's madness began. But while she stormed ahead with threats and lies, what she didn't know, what would soon bring her entire crusade crashing down, was that I had something she never imagined. The truth, buried beneath paperwork and arrogance, waiting to explode in her face. After the bogus fire hazard inspection and the intimidation tactics by her fake security goons, I realized it wasn't enough to keep defending myself. I needed to strike back. I started digging, not just into my own property lines and legal rights, but into hers. If she could weaponize her position, so could I, with facts, records, and the kind of receipts that make corrupt HOA boards tremble. I went to the county registrar's office, a place most people forget exists, where dusty files hold the secrets of property lines, annexations, and long-forgotten covenants. It took hours, a stiff back, and a lot of bitter coffee. But what I found nearly made me laugh out loud in the middle of that silent archive room. You see, back when the HOA community was built, decades ago, it had excluded 3 original parcels from its jurisdiction due to land ownership conflicts. Mine was one of them. The deed on my cabin was as clean and separate as an island in the sea. But here was the kicker. Not only was my land not part of the HOA, but the scenic trail Martha had been so desperate to access, it had once been marked for private conservation, donated by the previous owner as a memorial space for his veteran brother. That section was never meant to be commercialized or open to the public. And yet here Martha was, hosting wine-fueled yoga retreats on top of sacred ground. I found survey maps signed by engineers, conservation clauses tucked into the old deed, and even correspondence from the county warning the original HOA president against encroaching on protected areas. But that wasn't all. In my search, I stumbled upon HOA financial reports, publicly available, if you know where to look, that showed line items for community events, special maintenance, and consultant fees. Thousands of dollars had been siphoned from HOA dues into entertainment budgets, with no clear documentation. And guess whose name popped up over and over under the vendor category? Martha. She was paying herself through dummy shell companies, using HOA money to fund her private lifestyle, and likely hosting events on my land to create an illusion of activity and cover it up. Armed with documents, maps, and a fire in my gut that couldn't be extinguished, I called my lawyer and said, "We have everything. It's time." That weekend, as the wind howled through the trees and the sky darkened with rain, I decided to take back my land in the most permanent way possible. I hired a local ironworks crew to install a 10-foot wrought iron fence, not just around the trailhead, but around the entire border that connected to the HOA property. Motion sensors, floodlights, a new gate system with code access only. I even installed a warning sign with legal citations posted right at eye level. But that wasn't all. I commissioned a new plaque for Emily's garden, one that made my intentions clear. Private memorial grounds, in loving memory of my wife, and of peace stolen too soon. No trespassing. The crew worked fast, and by Sunday morning, it was done. That evening, like clockwork, Martha came storming up the hill in her SUV, this time dragging 3 well-dressed guests behind her, likely some high-paying resort donors she was trying to impress. When she saw the fence, she slammed her car door so hard it echoed, like thunder across the lake. I stood calmly on the other side of the gate, arms crossed, camera already recording. "What is this?" she snapped, eyes wild with fury. "You're turning this into a prison." I didn't even flinch. "It's called private property protection," I said, "and you should be familiar with that term since you've spent the last 3 months pretending mine doesn't exist." She stepped forward, gripping the bars like a caged animal, her fake composure peeling away. "You can't just wall yourself off from the community. This trail is essential for our seasonal guests. You're hurting our reputation." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Your reputation hurts itself, Martha, especially once your financial records go public." Her face paled for the first time. "What records?" she whispered, her voice suddenly fragile. I smiled and held up a manila envelope. "Vendor fraud, unauthorized access, violation of conservation land use, and trespassing on private property. I'm giving you one chance to step away before this becomes criminal." One of her guests tugged on her sleeve, clearly uncomfortable. "Martha, maybe we should go." But she wasn't ready to lose. Not yet. That's when she said it. The line I'll never forget. The one that finally revealed the rot behind the pearls and polished teeth. "You think this land is special? You think that gate makes you powerful? You're just a bitter, broken man hiding behind memories. No one cares about your dead wife or your forest of grief." The silence that followed was deafening. Even her guests recoiled. My heart beat like war drums, but I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Instead, I walked up to the gate, looked her square in the eye, and said, "You just made your last mistake." Then I turned and walked away, letting the gate slam shut behind me with the weight of justice and heartbreak combined. I spent that night in silence, sitting on Emily's bench, the soft chime of wind echoing through the trees. And for the first time in months, I felt a shift, not peace, not yet, but power. Not over others, but over myself. I had drawn my line. The war she started would end, not in noise, but in undeniable truth. And Martha? She had no idea the storm that was coming. I didn't plan for it to end the way it did. I thought it would drag on for months, maybe years, court filings, meetings, stress gnawing at me like termites under the floorboards. But when you hit a wall long enough and hard enough with the truth, it finally starts to crack. And Martha's carefully curated empire shattered faster than I imagined. Just 10 days after our final confrontation at the Iron Gate, I received a call from my attorney, and I could tell by the tone in his voice that the tide had finally turned. "You won't believe this," he said, almost laughing. "The county opened a fraud investigation into the HOA's finances. Someone leaked the documents before we even filed the lawsuit." I knew it wasn't me. I hadn't spoken to anyone beyond my lawyer and the surveyor, but someone on the inside must have had enough. Maybe a board member grew a conscience, or maybe one of Martha's allies realized she was about to drag them down with her. Either way, it was out now. The misuse of funds, the fake vendor contracts, the events thrown on my land disguised as HOA activities, and the big one, her personal luxury renovation she'd billed as community improvements, complete with receipts for imported tiles and designer patio furniture that never made it beyond her own backyard. Within a week, local news stations picked up the story. There was Martha's face, plastered across the evening broadcast, blurry stills of her screaming at my gate, paired with calm commentary from legal analysts explaining how overstepping HOA authority can constitute criminal trespass, harassment, and even racketeering when money's involved. I didn't even have to go to court yet. The court came to her. The board held an emergency meeting, and by the next morning, Martha was removed as HOA president. She didn't go quietly, of course. She blamed toxic neighbors, disloyal colleagues, and accused me of running a smear campaign. But no one was listening anymore. The same board that once laughed at my complaints now issued a public apology, a formal retraction of all HOA violations against me, an agreement to leave my land alone forever. And that wasn't all. The sheriff's office reached out and asked if I wanted to press criminal charges for harassment and trespassing. I said yes, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted accountability for Emily, for every night I sat in fear, and for every moment that peace was stolen from me by a woman who thought power made her invincible. When the civil court case finally came around, it lasted less than 2 hours. We presented everything: the title, the survey, the video evidence of her guests trampling through my private garden, and the documents showing HOA funds being funneled into her fake companies. The judge didn't mince words. He called her behavior entitled, reckless, and morally bankrupt. She was ordered to pay me $50,000 in damages, half for the property violations, and half for emotional distress. I didn't even care about the money. What mattered was the verdict. That someone finally said out loud, "You were wronged. You were right to fight." As I left the courthouse, people I didn't even know clapped me on the back. Some were other cabin owners. Others were quiet neighbors who had once been too scared to speak up. "You stood up to her," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "We never thought anyone could." I just nodded, too tired to gloat, too relieved to even speak. But peace didn't return all at once. It came slowly, like snow melting after a long winter. The silence returned first, not the tense, buzzing kind from before, but real quiet, honest quiet. No more footsteps on my trail. No more strange cars creeping down my drive. The lake shimmered like it used to. The wind whispered through the trees, unbothered. I started sleeping through the night again. I rebuilt the bench in Emily's garden and added a new plaque. Justice grows where roots are strong. It felt right. One afternoon, I found a letter tucked into my gate. No envelope. Just folded paper, sealed with tape. It was from one of Martha's former board members. She apologized, not just for what the HOA did, but for not speaking up sooner. "You reminded me what integrity looks like," she wrote. "I hope the quiet brings you comfort now." And it did. It really did. One morning in spring, I woke to birdsong and sunlight slicing through the trees, and I realized I wasn't waiting for the next attack anymore. I wasn't bracing for the next violation, the next insult, the next invasion. I was just living. Finally, I planted new flowers by the trailhead, bright yellow ones, Emily's favorite. I opened the gate once, not for anyone else, but for myself, just to walk the path again and remember why I built it. Not as a wall to keep people out, but as a boundary to protect what mattered most. I stood at the top of the ridge, staring down at the lake we once dreamed of calling home, and I whispered, "We did it, Em. We kept it safe." And in the breeze that followed, I swear I heard her laughter, soft, warm, proud. Martha, last I heard, sold her house and left the state. The HOA is under new leadership, and they haven't bothered me since. In fact, they sent me a fruit basket around Christmas, a peace offering, I guess. I gave it to a local shelter. Let someone else enjoy the sweetness. I have my own now. Real sweetness, real peace. And every time I walk out to the porch, coffee in hand, wind in my hair, I remember the war I didn't ask for and the strength I didn't know I still had. That cabin was meant to be a place of healing, and now, finally, it is. Not because I shut the world out, but because I stood my ground when the world tried to take what little I had left. And that's the thing about grief. It can bury you, or it can build you into something unshakable. I chose the latter. I chose to fight, and now I choose peace. If you've ever been bullied by an HOA, silenced by power, or made to feel small for protecting what matters most, you're not alone. I stood my ground, not because I wanted to fight, but because I refused to be erased. Your story matters. Subscribe to Faces of Racism, where we expose injustice, stand up to abuse of power, and give voice to those who are often ignored. Comment below if you faced anything like this. Your voice could be the one that inspires someone else to fight back.